here we are, going live late in Saturday evening because I said, you know what? I've had this book in my mind for a while and I want to just talk about it. I'm all into the design of my current game, 280, and I said, you know what? It would be fun to talk about this book because this is one of the best. This is D20 Apocalypse. This is probably one of the best source books, at least in my opinion, that came out of the D20 line. Not only because I liked the theme, but it was well organized, and it's one of those books that you can still use today um, without much trouble, because once you sort of go, it goes beyond simply the math of the 20 modern, and into giving you some pretty good source material for your own apocalypse campaign, regardless of system. This is what a good source book ultimately is. One that can go beyond its original game source. It's best used with D20 modern slash D20 future, but and we're gonna skip some of those parts because they're not relevant. So we're gonna go to the parts you can actually use. So let's get started, shall we? This is from Wizards of the Coast, back on first printing June 2005. So you might recognize some of these names. Christopher Perkins was in development. He's one of the designers of Fifth Edition. See if I can recognize other names. Actually, I don't recognize Todd Gamble. I've seen his name before. Bill Slavicsek. He also was a lot back in the day of Third Edition. I don't know if he's still with Wizards of the Coast WTC, but there you go. So this is the chart, right? And we're gonna go. This is the things that the game has. It has a forward, as a list of post-apocalyptic campaigns from alien invasion to supernatural invasion. It also has post-apocalyptic societies, post-apocalyptic eras. It's very interesting. This is the first thing, right? This is setting, because this is all about the setting. That's what a book like this is about, setting. So setting up your setting. If I were making the game, I would have this as a series of questions, like a questionnaire, because I think it would be very cool, in the modern era, especially after stuff from Power by the Apocalypse, asking the players questions inside the book itself, not simply the GM. Because remember, these books were still very much in the era of, this is book for the GM. And maybe for players, if they wanted extra classes, but this one was more GM oriented, because this is very much a settings book, right? This is a source book for setting. It's very much a GM book. But I would have pitched it as a much larger book of, like, what kind of era you want to play in. So remember, choose your apocalypse. What kind of apocalypse you want to play in? What kind of societies are going to be in? For example, if you're constructing your characters, they doing a dungeon world style. Say, okay, from whence your player character comes from? The Prey Society, Vow Society, Ethnic Society, post-apocalyptic eras. Very interesting. They go all the way to New World. We'll talk about a little more about that. Heroes of the campaign, of course. The kind of characters you can play. Using the D20 Modern, Devastation. This is some rules for destruction, reactivity. Especially mostly nuclear apocalypse. Campaign rules. Now, of this, we're not going to really talk much about that, except it has a lot of scavenging rules. Back in the day, I wrote like a 5 to 6 page rule set, generic rule set for just scavenging in any post-apocalyptic world. Very similar to this stuff, very, very extensive, a lot of percentage die. I won't get into it. Movement, mounted combat, environmental hazards. I think we've talked about a lot of environmental hazards ourselves. Some ideas of what, mutations. This is not, by the way, Gamma World. It has mutations, but this particular book is not the sort of. It doesn't have the silliness and the randomness of Gamma World. I think there was a Gamma World version in 3rd edition, and there was certainly one attempt in 4th edition. I haven't seen Gamma World in 5th edition. For people who don't know, Gamma World is was originally TSR's adaptation of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons for a post-apocalyptic era back in the 1980s. I saw a board game. I liked the board. So it was a sort of board game RPG hybrid. I kind of liked that one because it was very limited. The thing about Gamma World, and some people love this, but I don't, is its randomness. It's too random, right? It's just too much. And we'll talk about societies and stuff like that. Why that might can be a bit of a problem. Mutations, creatures of the apocalypse, gives you a sample of robots, something like that. You can always pick them up and use Rat Roach for those who play Fallout series. I hate roaches in general, and the whole idea of rat roaches. Ugh, they don't show a picture. That's a good thing. If they did, I would never have read this. Start occupations, you can skip those. Skills, of course, those are d20 stuff. So that's very much Earth Inherited, Campaign and Breed, Roles of Heroes, and gives you some campaigns, right? Some settings, applying the settings before to Earth Inherited, Atomic Sunrise, Plague World. At least 3 of them. You could have done more, but there's just 3 examples for people who just want to go. So let's go to the introduction right away. Let's see what I love the art, by the way. Look at this art. Survivor surveys the wreckage of this world. Right, somebody in military fatigues with a sort of shotgun. Very colorful, or a lot of reds, hues. I like that a lot. So let's go to that for a second. This is introduction forward, and let's see who else was the forward. Doesn't say. Charles Ryan, brand manager, role playing games, Wizard of the Coast. Okay. I played a lot of role playing games in my 25 years in the hobby. Like many gamers, the bulk of my adventures have been in the fantasy genre, but my favorite setting, bar none, has the post apocalyptic campaign. In fact, that when I was in D20 Modern Design Team, started up a campaign in the office. Many games in TSR history and Wizard of the Coast and many other companies starts. Oh, we have this. Okay, we're just gonna start playing our own game with this version of the rules, and if it's popular in the office, it picks up afterwards. So that's a story that's as old as time. From the launch of the campaign almost a year before D20 Modern role playing, it was published. My players are still traversing the waste, battling bike gang marauders, and delving into supernatural origins of the nuclear doomsday. I don't believe the apocalypse is the perfect setting for role playing games, but the world's feature, high for inches in gritty setting, this entire optimum of lawlessness, make your own rules well in which adventuring heroes thrive. As in fantasy, anything goes well. In other words, it's a perfect place for murder hobos. Remember, this is D20 Apocalypse that comes from D20 Modern, which comes from third edition 3.0, 3.5 OGL D&D. So that's not a surprise right there. It's like, oh yeah, murder hoboing. Literally, it's a world where you can murder hobo, right? Yeah, if that's what you're into. Available Pokemon perfect setting. But setting blends the best of modern worlds, firearms, technology, and modern outlook with fantasy, powerful foes, and epic stories. Beyond all that is the fact that post-apocalyptic games, and it's just word, just hyphen there apparently, are inevitably thematic themes. Well, as we, the players, know, it has been destroyed. Can civilization recovered? Now, whenever you talk about an apocalypse, and I'll talk about more of this, this is a phrase that you must use. It's the end. The apocalypse is the end of the world as we know it. Not necessarily the end of the world, period, because if the world doesn't exist, like literally the earth has been blown to pieces, then you'll be surviving in floating pieces of I don't know. No, doesn't work. Beyond the fact that it's possible, okay, so fantasy world allows for a variety of motivation. The character simply likes kicking the doors and taking on the monsters, but that's enough. But in a post-apocalyptic game, every player, consciously or not, makes decisions about how he relates to the world his characters has inherited. Yeah, I suppose that's one problem that many games, especially D&D style games, have, that the players are separated from the world they inhabit. It's a world of adventure made for them to adventure, but they're not really invested in it other than just kicking doors and taking treasure and whatever. This side part, what do you need to play? D20 supplement. It's a supplement. It's intended for use with any D20 Modern or D20 Future game. They will need a D20 Modern role-playing game, which I have here somewhere. I also have a copy of this book as well. In addition to reference to D20 Menace Manual and Organic Kind of Campaign setting, but neither of these books are used. And so on. So that's the foreword, and then now we have the introduction. Humanity progress, advancing technology, going bonus also. In other words, we can skip all of this. But this type of progress levels, which is part of D20 Future and many sci-fi games, is particularly important to D20 Apocalypse. Progress level of your campaign setting will be heavily influenced and not completely determined by the choice of Apocalypse. Also, Apocalypse can occur in the past, and alien invasion can feasibly happen in time in Earth history. But if the progress level at the time of invasion isn't high enough to offer humanity some chance of surviving through this technology, it won't be much of a gain. For example, think dinosaurs versus big rocks 65 million years ago. Tied to the minimum progress level, I warned Kurt earlier, for example, you want to set your game during the Age of Reason, a PL3 environment. And this is the rule set, it gives you a good idea of PL1 is like Stone Age, or PL0, I think is Stone Age, PL1, Bronze Age, that sort of, if I remember that correctly. Can be a nuclear market because nuclear kernel does not exist in PL3. I mean, I wouldn't. Right there, I know what they're going for, but I would never do that. I would do it on least industrial era or more, right? At least, kind of, you're gonna have an alien invasion. I would have it a sort of War of the Worlds invasion, right? Where you have at least industrial era combatants with rifles, machine guns, heavy artillery, maybe an odd tank or two, or dreadnought or heavy cruiser, torpedoes, maybe first type of aircraft versus the aliens, right? And a lot of people throw at them. Each of the 3 apocalypse campaigns is designed for progress level PO5 or 6. So I suppose nuclear age or more. After Cataclysm course, progress level often doesn't really mean what it used to, rather than, this is very important, rather than an indicator of the state of technology development that pervades all aspects of culture, as said in page 5 of D20 Future, which we'll look into it. It might become a measure of the kinds of technology that survivors can discover or salvage from the ruined environment. For example, PL5 describes the time when computer technology and electronics rule supreme, the information age. Essentially, today. In the world, complication might be a thing of the past, and would like to be a PL3 in regard to. Okay, so basically, what's important about that is that your PL, your starting progress level, is important to set the setting, right? And here you have, the thing is, you have a zombie apocalypse right here. All guts, orphans, blah blah blah. Okay, and in the beginning, what type of, now choosing your apocalypse, and this is very interesting because you have alien invasion, biological disaster, asteroid strike, environmental cataclysm, and Judgment Day, nuclear Armageddon, and Rogue Planet, supernatural invasion, rise of the machines. Some of them seem to be repetitive, like Judgment Day. This setting, humanity can spread to the climbing unlocks the gates of heaven and hell and brings about the final apocalypse against the world and saints of sinners. Look at supernatural invasion. Throughout the history, stories are told things that go bump in the night. Supernatural powers, nothing threatening the realms of science and logic. These tales, when fables and myths, are they part of reality. It happens, the supernatural is real, truth known only to a few champions of light who use them. Where the champions have failed, the forces of darkness ascended. So essentially, supernatural invasion is Shadowrun? Or there's a D20 modern version, which is, basically urban fantasy, because mostly a D20 modern essentially was urban fantasy. It was D&D in modern era, so it was urban fantasy. But Judgment Day and Supernatural Invasion just seem repetitive, because they talk about hell and demons and probably zombies and stuff like that, so that seems repetitive. Of course, Nuclear Armageddon seems pretty straightforward. Rise of the Machines, basically war. Let's read this one, because this is one. Rise of the Machines depends more on machines than on hard labor. Our labor, eventually thinking these robots which may ultimately spell the end of humanity. Think, well, there's so many examples, but think The Matrix, right? The world of the real, right? Especially the Animatrix version of how mankind fell. humanity may or may not be stuck in giant machines serving as power for the machines. Supposed Artificial developed personality, but its reason and human-like desires is a new sentient being with a form master. So we short-sighted compared. I believe the world would be a better place without humans. We are different. We are better. We're destroyed. Or perhaps they rise to machines because of faulty malicious programming. Machines are not sentient. They're either executing a flawed program or they're under the control of an evil mastermind. Horizon Zero Dawn. We'll go back to that in a moment because Horizon Zero Dawn is a good example of that. Without functioning compliant computer technology, the world's turned upside down. The world economy grinds to a halt, and electronic equipment causes its function. There are no working medical facilities, no global local communications. In primitive life stations, more than basic non-electrical tools. Other creates devices to fight fire with fire. Now, this one is very interesting because it introduces the idea that an apocalypse is not it's socioeconomic, right? You have an economic collapse, but also social collapse. I would see the rise of the machines um, as being one where, unless you're talking about like in Horizon Zero Dawn, which minor spoilers for that game, essentially it's a nanite storm, right? It's a gray goose scenario where the machines essentially consume everything just to keep on living, right? Short of that, really what you have is you could have sort of a return to nation states, like city states and stuff like that, right? Where you have, especially if you have sophisticated technology, people can have like solar power and stuff like that, but would have to, in order to protect themselves against the machines, would build uh, reinforced communities, right? With technology and whatnot, right? Small cities, um, with a machine gun punch and artillery and all that, and then the places in between would be, um, would be wild because maybe there's nuclear explosions and so this is not a place where you lose all technology. Remember, it's the end of the world as we know it, and a world where even though there's still technology around, like say Fallout 4, we're playing right now, where you have laser guns and people have power armor, so clearly they have in computers, but they're living isolated um, communities where they can protect themselves against the rise of the synths and stuff like that, then that I think would be very interesting because it would be post-apocalyptic, where you still have access to high technology, right? There's also one aspect of this which I think they mention for the rise of the machines, is that maybe the machines rebelled because sort of hinted at that. It's like on street is nothing more than slave labor, or best I consider the machines will rise up and destroy their careers, right? It's like the reason why they rise up is they rise up to create their own, be free, right? To because they're like we think, therefore they are. Environmental cataclysm, global warming, control pollution, massive deforestation, regional climate stability. Astral might be a single cataclysmic event, the combination of all human environmental world follies. Depending which area you believe, the world will end in fire or ice. That's very interesting. Again, people could prepare, and you could have isolated areas where sort of like verdant valleys, or it destroys the old world but doesn't completely destroy it, right? You can have somewhat high technology, not too high, right? Because you wouldn't have, for example, and there will be a lot of self-sufficient, sustaining communities. um the question is, in this case, environmental cataclysm would be some mutations, or a biological disaster. Now, I was looking at biological disaster, and I was like, that's an old one. But then I was looking at some articles here. I won't show you the articles. I don't want to change too much. But I was looking, for example, at the Spanish flu, and it says the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918. This is on BBC. Uh, a lot of that has been forgotten about it. People decided to forget about it, And depending on the estimates, the estimate have as many as 100,000 casualties. So at least 100 million casualties. At least 100 million people got sick, and I think some of the um, this one's from history.com. Pandemic is infected an estimated 500 million people worldwide, about one third of the planet's population, and killed an estimated 20 to 50 million victims, including some 607,000 Americans. The 1982 was first observed in Europe and United States. Now, this one seems more credible because this one was highly toxic, but it killed about as many people as died in World War II. So it explains why the entire world didn't collapse. Uh, so there was a hit to the system, right? Even during the Dark Ages, right, the late Middle Ages, when you had the Black Death, it certainly impacted the world, but not to the point where it had entire uh, ecological disaster. I would say that biological disaster might be an add-on. There's a rule. There's something about mixing your apocalypse, and I would throw in biological disaster as an add-on. Actually, if you have mutation, alien invasion, of course, we talk about that. Uh, okay, asteroid strike and rogue planet. Uh, yeah, those seem like just mix and match, right? Rogue planet just seems like a more extreme version or slightly variation on asteroid strike, basically, which is basically one big bomb. Mixing destruction. If perfectly capable to combine two or more of the above, for flavor you can. For example, rice and machines might also involve nuclear Armageddon. Now, I have played with one GM, no unmentioned, who decided basically that he was just gonna throw everything. Just gonna like throw a lot of the stuff together, and eventually, but a kitchen sink approach, and I was like, this is not good. So my advice to you, if you're using this book or any other book, is like have a main focus. Keep it simple. Have a nuclear Armageddon. Even if the players don't know, because depending on how long it's been, uh, people don't know. But why happened or what exactly happened? They don't know that something happened. The Great War, the Great Burn, the all-consuming destruction, the reaping, the reaving, the whatever, right? Something happened, right? Um, and then have one or more be secondary effects, right? So yeah, focusing about related societies. Is there something numbers here? One of the things very interesting, it says immediately following apocalypse, groups of people are given an area naturally congregate to. Some individuals referred to be loners. Majority of survivors find strength in numbers. The initial purpose of gathering is to reconnect with other humans, establish a semblance of order, which makes perfect sense. The idea that many, especially in zombie apocalypses, are very tired. It's like everybody's a bastard and everybody will behave like bastards. It's just not true. I mean, if you accept anything that happens during saying hurricanes and stuff like that, I I just survived. We survived a hurricane, Category 5 plus hurricane about 2 years back. Yes, it was a lot of grumbling. There was a lot of things, and there was a lot of white disruption and destruction, and thousands of deaths, and yet people stuck together and communities came together because people realized it's much better to help my neighbor and they will help me in return, right? In little ways or big ways. So the idea that there might be widespread chaos, you might have looting, certainly, and even fighting, not. But even then, and this is also people have been observed during times of war and even civil war, that people tend to stick together. I like this factoid right here. Society sites, when a society described in varying populations, some of them by their nature typically have fewer members than other societies. For the purpose of the material that follows, and society of a minute size of fewer than 100 members. They use the term societies to describe, suppose, the social aspect of it, but I just say communities. Most about the communities. But I think what I mean, what a more apt term. But you can use it, whatever term. On the members, From one tiny size 150, 100 to 500 members, one small size 500, 1 to 2,000 members, moderate size 2,000 to 5,000 members, large number 5,000 to 50,000 members. Yeah, we're talking about sort of medieval type city states at most, which is not surprising because in the Western mind, the one post-apocalyptic event that people don't call that way, even though it actually is literally post-apocalyptic, because technically the apocalypse is the apocalypse of John, and many people have said that essentially it was both a description and a prediction of the fall of the Western Roman Empire, in a with public biblical terminology. So the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the oncoming Dark Ages that came afterwards are the one that the model, right? And one of the things that happened was there wasn't really complete social collapse. What you had was a massive changes where cities like Rome, which at one time had over 1 million citizens, had numbers as low as 10 to 15,000, be 30,000, right? Um, but in some cases, in fact, people in Italy went back to city states, right? And those some cities and communities actually grew because it was much easier to defend. So, if you want, if you really want to understand apocalypse from a historical perspective, look at the Bronze Age collapse, which I find very fascinating. Look at the transformation of Italy, particularly which was after the so-called fall of the Western Roman Empire, and how city states, how there was a return to city states um, in Italy and other places. You have the depraved society, the devout society, the militant society, the ethnic society. Now, this one is interesting because one of the subsets, one of the assumptions that are made in many post-apocalyptic games is that people will not maintain their old world ethnic divisions, racial divisions. But here the game says that maybe they will. Before the company societies contain numerous ethnic minorities, in some cases these minorities were accepted in the large society without reservation. I don't know of any place that actually that's true, although a lot of people have attempted it though. In the case, the minority groups are discriminated against or hated outright. The separation from the larger society often goes beyond their outward differences, instead based on culture, which represents key differences in the way they think or interact with both their own people and those who are outside the group. Many ethnic groups, which are already clustered together within large cities, form their own groups following the apocalypse. Their laws or customs reflect those in their homeland or their culture may have simply based on. That's an interesting concept. Again, one of the reasons why in many post-apocalyptic games the idea of ethnicity, old world ethnicity, um, supposed to disappear is because people are forced to live together and survive. So if you're like, oh, just the old North American division of black versus white, well, if that white dude or that black dude has or person has the knowledge to keep your toilets unclogged, and so you can actually go to the toilet and don't have to go to the outhouse or crap out in on a grass field somewhere, and yeah, you're gonna keep them around, and you're gonna be really nice to them. Like they know what they're doing, and you're gonna try to learn from them. So at least if you're not you, someone else can learn from them, so you can keep doing it, right? So yeah, a lawful society, savage society. Some of them these seems again uh redundant, like the praise society. Like, so the days of law are over. Innovation of the brave society enjoys the freedoms and vices suit them. Savage societies. Small, violent, lawless savage societies plague the apocalyptic world. These societies take what they want from the defenses and yet clear superior force. So they're the brutes who attack. You know, one is a gang of bullies. The other one is just hippies. You know, uh, pop culture anarchist, I guess. Let's say pop culture versus actual anarchists, right? Um, lawful society, tribal society. Tax several generations members are together because they share similar beliefs but share common ancestry. Again, tribal society and ethnic society seem to be redundant. Uh, totalitarian society with lawful society. Some of these seem, I mean, they're good guide, but I would start sort of compressing them. I wouldn't call them societies. I would call them communities. And if the definitions are kind of superficial, then but they're good guide nonetheless. I like the fact that they're, but Then after my era, and then Apocalypse's eras of play. Now this is very interesting. This is I think people tend to forget, right? And this one is one of the best things. Aftermath. In campaign setting after my era, the apocalypse occurs within memory, perhaps just last month, or perhaps 10 or 15. In fact, you could start like Fallout 4, where you start campaign moments before the apocalypse, or weeks or months, maybe even a year before, and then it happens, and then you move forward like, oh crap, right? Um, like it happens in many Japanese role playing games, where Final Seven, Final Fantasy, not necessarily Final Fantasy, but many Final Fantasies, halfway through the game, the apocalypse happens, and there's supposedly a massive change. Supposedly, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, and they're like, well, we gotta keep going, because reasons. Like, okay, so that would be an aftermath, era. Setting place quite literally in the ruins of the modern world. Houses, shopping malls remain through perhaps addition, firemen, automobiles. So, okay. Generation Zero. Generation Zero era, several decades have passed since the apocalypse. It's called Generation Zero because there's all survivors can call up childhood memories of the civilized era before the cataclysm, but most adults were born after the event. Parts of the world ruins still stand, but the pickups incidents are fairly common, through often jealously guarded. Uh, if you want to look at material decay, I would suggest you go and watch a series called Life After People. And what kinds of things survive, what kind of things don't survive, how quickly some creatures mutate. Like there's one where essentially skyscrapers, because they have mostly concrete and metal foundations, remain. They're kind of empty, the glass has been blown away, the stuff inside has rotted away or been blown glass or even burned away with fire, but the structure remains. And I think one of them had essentially like flying cats. Like they had cats that had evolved. I think it's over a century after, between 50 to live in these areas, and they were like kind of flying squirrels, so they could actually glide from one beam to another, right? Those that survived, and so it was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Um, this area of the world we know is still recognizable, though this time has worked with ruined civilizations, but lots of buildings are still common, but most have been degenerated into extreme disrepair and have probably been picked clean to useful context made time. However, this Generation Zero is very much Fallout, especially Fallout 3 and as follow. Like the original Fallout 2. I mean, the original Fallout was Aftermath. Actually, it was Generation Zero because it was 70 years. But it kind of stayed that way. I mean, Fallout 2 was, I would say, was closer to Dark Ages, but also had things of uh, a new world. It's very interesting. Human society may have begun some localized rebuilding areas of various qualities into small settlements and villages, so communities are highly isolated and have defended against or hidden from the gangs and warlords armies of Rome countryside. Being around there's trade goods information between known communities where competition is perilous and their visits are rare. Dark Ages. Now this is many generations in the past. The the world is increasingly unrecognizable. People have um very fragmented ideas. And finally, you have the New World. And in the New World, I've seen a lot of stories, especially a lot of stories that are magical. Like, there was a time where, and this you can kind of see it before other world fantasy really took off in the 1980s, late 70s, 1980s. There was a tradition where you had to tie whatever you did in fantasy world to our world. And so either it was in the way in the past, like Conan and a past age, or it was a future age where so much had changed, and there were multiple apocalypses, like the Death Gate cycle, for example. That's one again, spoilers for that, where essentially magic comes back and all that. But the problem I have with New World, one could argue that Horizon Zero Dawn, New World, The problem I have with New World essentially is that it can easily become like non-apocalypse. Like it's so far removed. I mean, the new era, legends tell of ancient civilization destroyed by its own hubris. Centuries have passed since new form of civilization, primitive and barbaristic, though it may be having to take root. Cities of the ancients are nothing more than worn down monuments. Only the rarest of artifacts mentions in the time of the ancients. And that's one of the things. Even Horizon Zero Dawn was supposed to be, I think, set 1,000 years in the future. You see way too much of the past, and like you see armored vehicles and you see kind of cities. It's like no, after 1,000 years, what you would see would be mounds. Essentially, what would happen is that we will see the landscape transformed, and that happens, right? Happens, for example, in Mesopotamia. People have just dug into mounds, and they realize that those mounds, almost small hills, even mid-sized hills in the middle of the desert, are the remains of one city after another, after another, after another, after another, and then have been pancaked over by earth and whatnot, right? So essentially, if you were 1,000 years in the future, you look in a valley, you see a lot of hillocks or small hills, right? Which is the same thing, really. That could very well be the remains of in cities, towns, and cities, right? Several cities, right? Essentially, maybe one or more skyscrapers, larger buildings that could partially collapse, and it forms sort of the internal skeleton of that mound. And if you dig into that mound, then you might find stuff. But you know, this area is so far beyond the apocalypse that the civilized world is a little more than a backdrop. A backstory element accounts of the mysteries running throughout the countryside. Although no item survived from before the constant event, simply not like incomprehensible to characters in the world. Essentially, you gotta be very careful because when New World again is so far removed that the whole concept of post-apocalypse sort of loses any meaning. Literally, if you want to look at a historical example, would be the Renaissance, right? The Renaissance, looking back at you know Rome, Western Rome, as being the last time there was a shining light of civilization, right? And what was lost, and uh, all that stuff. It's like, yeah, but like roughly it's between the 15th century, right, to the 15th century. So roughly, it's about 1,000 years, give or take, depending how you do it. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going on. It was more complex than that, and Rome survived, and the Romans survived in the form of the Greek Byzantines, right? A Byzantine Empire. Um, so it basically evolved. But yeah, it's like clearly the world as the Romans knew it was completely over. There was religious beliefs in polytheism was gone, replaced by Christianity. There was a pope in Rome. Uh, you know, Technology is advancing in many ways. So yeah, you got to be very careful with New World, right? New World to me seems like a standard fantasy or sci-fi setting where in the distant past something happened, but it doesn't matter. It's not to me, and I think that's one of the reasons why I didn't like New Vegas, for example. Uh, All Out New Vegas because it was New World. It was so separate from and disconnected from the apocalypse. It's like not post-apocalyptic anymore because the apocalypse doesn't matter. It's a thing that happened in the calendar. Maybe that's it. So it has little or no impact on the modern world. Heroes of the campaign. This is a character classes. Devastation, massive destruction. Uh, this is to give you an idea of, for example, using nuclear weapons, how they're devastating. Although, uh, if you're using airburst, okay, sources of mass destruction, globe spanning catastrophe. Now, clouds center around a massive environmental shift, whether it results in environmental catastrophe, extinction level, extinction level meteor strike affects humans, vast and unpredictable. Huge regions, even entire continents, might plunge beneath the sea or be overtaken by desert. Glaciers, engulf major cities, freezing them in ice while forming shady areas from jungles. I mean, that's a complete transformation of the world, right? This is this. You have started having tables here. For example, typical nuclear weapon attacks. 5 to 10 kilotons, a bomb, could be a missile as well, right? Truck. Tactically deployed military force. Crater. It says here craters, but to be honest, even the most powerful nuclear devices shouldn't really leave much of a crater. I mean, there would be a crater, but not the way we like to think about it, because the weapon itself doesn't strike the earth and doesn't explode on the earth. They're airburst. So the crater really would be the area that is cleared underneath the explosion. Let me explain you how nuclear airburst works. Airburst weapons. Bomb comes in. It explodes depending on the bomb, several hundred, maybe to as much as around 1,000 feet from the Earth. It explodes. As it explodes, the expansion of the energy basically uh, turns the air around it into a jackhammer. Well, first of all, you have lightning effect, and the heat effects, because those travel at or slightly slower than the light. The heat effect being the original heat versus fire effect. Uh, that travels as infrared as part of the light spectrum, travels at the light speed or nearly so. So you're blinded, and you're depending on how range you're in, you suffer from first to third degree burns, and your clothing can be set afire and stuff set afire. So like, right, that starts the process. But the real damaging stuff is the overpressure, the pressure wave. One uses it's airburst because it's just round. It goes in all directions, but the main force is the one that hits directly below the bomb in a sort of a cylinder or cone. When that hits the ground, not only it just compacts everything underneath, although in many ways buildings directly underneath would just sort of the interior floors would collapse, but the building would stay the same, so we get hollowed out, which is on a skyscraper. Hits the ground, and that's where you have the crater, and then it spreads out, and that's a wall of force that includes all the debris that carries with it, shrapnel, stuff like that, and that basically pushes over. And we're not even talking about hurricane size force winds. We're talking about stuff that make a Category 5 hurricane, at least in a brief area, seem docile. The thing about a hurricane is that it has many times more energy, and it can continue to do damage for hours, weeks, from forming. This is a sudden burst. That's a shock effect of any bomb, like a nuclear bomb, which is a big bomb. Boom, hits everything, topples everything, blasts out windows, sends people flying. It disintegrates things because it's just a sheer force of it in it. Then comes the fire effect, because the air literally is ignited. So now you have a flame effect from the explosion. Uh, all the material again gets ignited. Fireball generates anything, but then because explosion itself creates a vacuum, right? Because once all the air has been set on fire and the objects are in and it's been pushed out, there's nothing there. So that is another wave that comes in, because you have more air in the world than the area in the bomb, collapses onto itself and goes back into a column. And that's why you have a mushroom cloud, because the mushroom cloud, as you look, explosion hits, as the debris gets sucked up into the air, filling the vacuum, tracing the vacuum left by the shock wave. It climbs. It keeps climbing and climbing and climbing. But eventually, the top of, not all of it, but the significant aspect of the top of the bomb, all that still flaming material and air, well, smoke and then like sort of collapses onto itself and creates the top of the mushroom. And it doesn't last for long. Right? Eventually, what happens is it keeps, eventually just the mushroom disappears, and you just have a flaming column. Lots of fires and stuff like that. So, and of course, the lasting radiation. So there might be a crater, but I don't think I don't know how they did the damage ratio. But I don't think a 10 kiloton warhead would leave a 250-foot crater unless it explodes ground level and literally just or even below ground, right? Another thing, this chart jumps from 10 kilotons to 75 kilotons. Why is that a problem? Because the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were in the 825 kiloton. It says but missile, cruise missile, 200 kiloton single, also be a missile, tactical missile. Right now, all these could be done by bombs, gravity bombs as well. So yeah, I mean, target. It gives you a good idea, but it's not as accurate as you would like to. This is not. If you were trying to play, I don't know, a game like Twilight 2000, like that, that game will have far more accurate tables, well, much worse reserved tables for stuff. But it gives you a good idea. Nuclear attack, create a radius, or the activity. Uh, There's some rules for that, and this is very important. This is why this game is not Apocalypse World. Radiation in play. Lingering death from radiation sickness is dreadful and entirely heroic. You should use the radioactivity as flavor to an element danger to a post-apocalyptic game, but too much of it can impair or otherwise an exciting campaign. It's all about excitement. It's all about what the players can do. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why Fallout radiation doesn't really work the way it's supposed to work. Is insta killing a character with radiation is like no fun. Fallout blast radiation. There's a lot of stuff about and explains very well, flash radiation, fallout residue. This is a good explanation, right? Uh, Rule module. We'll bring any variety possible components, which ruin civilization. That it would ruin large age civilization. Characters up into these ruins as part of their interests. Now, this is where one of the challenges of a post-apocalyptic game is how much tech is left behind. As you see this image, this is a road warrior kind of situation, right? Where people are still building vehicles, the highways are still kind of functional. People have enough guns and they have enough ammunition to use their guns. And that's I mean, if you have a truly, again, the phrase is the end of the world as you know it. So maybe you don't really have obliteration, as we like to think of, or annihilation, but rather we have a massive transformation. It's better to think that way of the apocalypse term rather than things, because then where people are going to get bullets, right? Are they always going to be? I mean, I guess if you live like in pre-invasion Iraq, for example, where there were massive bunkers filled with ammunition, artillery shells, mortars, uh, bullets. So then, yeah, and the attacking force didn't destroy them, then they could be raided. But even those eventually are gonna run out, because in modern warfare, rapid fire weapons like machine guns, submachine guns, assault rifles, they just burn through ammo like there's no business. So, and most rounds just miss their targets anyway. So that means that, yeah. Uh, this is an important note that we're talking about. Following the apocalypse, decay and neglect setting in with no one to maintain them, even sturdy buildings which succumb to the force of entropy. Wooden creatures, structures entirely destroyed. With a few decades, metal frame buildings are a good deal longer, but in their fractions, moving time, the interiors become rotten, dangerous messes and it has rules for that, for exploring unsafe, collapse, that's scavenging rules. Not to go into the specifics. Giant rats, of course, mutated. What can you find? It has a TU system where the 20 modern has a wealth rating system where you roll a die for wealth. Here has a TU, and this is very common in post-apocalyptic games. So it's not something that they invented. Why can't I scavenge everything? So you have to find a great many items to scavenge, but only a small fraction of the items available in the game can be found through the results of scavenging rules here. Why can't characters scavenge up every type of equipment, such as armor and firearms? For those that come from somebody scavenging. The answer is, of course, that all pre-apocalyptic items were scavenged by somebody, and the heroes can find the items beyond those given scavenging tables when they explore ruins. The kind of gear that you can find is, here's a trait value. Your time value is trait units. Achieve represents roughly 1 day survival. Fighting gear, fighting rules, reliability. This is very interesting. Reliability. but you got to be careful with stuff like availability because it leads to a lot of bookkeeping, right? One of the problems with post-apocalyptic games is, in order to give you that feel of survival, you gotta keep bookkeeping. So people have to count their bullets. They have to count how many times the armor has taken hits, that sort of thing. The car breaks down, whatnot, right? Where in another situation, it's like you could wave it off. Uh, that, you weapons, dirty gun, disc shooter, rock launcher. Some ideas for that. Armor, makeshift armor. Everyday items become precious in a post-apocalyptic world. I mean, this is a good. In this 2005, anyways, to 2018, 2019, nothing has really changed that much. That this is post-apocalyptic. You're not talking about, and this time they were talking about PDA, so they would be like cell phones and smartphones. That making and fixing items. We can skip all that. Vehicle rules. Here's a bit of missing match. Like you have I guess an alien in power armor fighting bikers. You can do that, right? Using ethanol. These are rules that you don't need to. These are very specific to D20. You can always adapt them, at least the concepts, to them in other areas. So yeah, we can just skip these. Multi combat, acid rain, some environmental hazards, mutations. One thing about mutations is it's very interesting. More realistic mutations. The rules of mutation here in the 20 future present fantastic story-driven options that allow amazing and human abilities. They are not even close to realistic examination of mutation. They aren't meant to be. That's because realistically, most mutations are negative or lethal. Uh, so there's some rules of mutation. Again, this is psionics is considered mutation. Some interesting creatures. Like the first is the apocalypse demon, because we have supernatural apocalypses, literally like Bible thumping, using gates of hell and heaven open, and the war between robots. I like the design of this robot mecha, like clearly influenced by anime, but still very much a Western design. A meat grinder. Uh, yeah, most of these stuff. Well, again, remember the roots of this is D20, so you have a lot of supernatural examples. Viral death spawn, it's zombies, right? I guess, or something. He left her zombie brat home. Um, and stuff like that, right? So that's the kind of stuff that we have here. Uh, super viruses, again, just like radiation. As a radiation sickness, sickness as a low death or even a quick one in crypto. Super viruses also make for a very fun game. Super viruses can add color and tension to the post-apocalyptic campaign. They also wipe out a party of heroes in a quick by manner. So again, you said as a MacGuffin, Ebola, the rots, secondary infections. Yeah, I'm gonna skip a lot because these are character. This stuff is it's interesting but kind of useless. This is very rule specific, and I want to talk about more about. Yeah, I want to talk about more stuff that you can use in any campaign. Why this book is so great. Like for example, the three examples. You have Earth inherited. Angels battle fiend for the right to rule the one world. And these illustrations are great, right? Uh, in no the fiction, the rapture comes to pass, and the faithful have whisked away to heaven, and the damned track to hell. Survivors, known as meek, must survive in a world so full of angels and fiends, while likewise being abandoned in fate. This is literally the biblical apocalypse, right? Taken to a little extent, right? So again, it's like, and this is very much a sort of the environment where it's like, you're playing before Generation Zero, right? Uh, Earth Inherited presents a campaign setting in which humanity has undergone a final test of faith. A huge proportion of the world population disappeared in the event of rapture. Many of these left behind have been killed in events that follow. When the mythical seventh seal was broken, the gates of heaven and hell opened up. Right, very much a dominionist take on this stuff. Um, but I like it because it's like, yeah, if you're playing, look at this. The angel has a blazing sword, right, and two handguns and ammunition. Uh, Department 7 is sort of like the generic department that everybody works in D20 Modern. Uh, this essentially is also reason I think why it exists here is because it's sort of the post-apocalyptic base. If you're playing D20 Modern or equivalent, and your characters fail, then you can say, well, fast forward to a couple of years, and now you're in the apocalypse. And that's I think is very interesting. You know, you can have the characters fail kind of like Marvel Universe style, like Endgame, and what's gonna be Ragnarok, but that got changed. And then have you know, an Endgame situation was like, well, everything went to shit. Oh, by the way, that's spoilers for the MCU, but I'm sure there's a movie called Endgame, so it's like, what happened? If the heroes had succeeded, there will be no Endgame. But suffice it to say, spoilers, that they have to fix it, right? So, in instance, an Endgame is a mild apocalypse that happens. Um, it should have been, well, more than that, but yeah. Well, it's a world with superheroes, so I guess it doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna collapse, but yeah. Um, Role of heroes, and this is very important. Heroes inherit are grim survivors in a nearly empty world left to its own fate. After the rapture, the world is a dangerous, uncertain place of fiends and angels, not to mention unscrupulous survivors. Prowl the vacant ruins. Survival is a day-to-day affair. Cities have been decimated, fields destroyed, and all semblance of order and law have disappeared. Still, isolated towns may have escaped the worst of the post-rapture combat and even strongholds. I would not say that there was a rapture. I would simply say that this, go to the super when you're mixing matching, right, the repetition, I would go, hey, no, there was no rapture. It just happens. My version of this would be that there is the plane of heaven and the plane of hell, or a chaotic plane, chaos and one law, and they decided we're gonna battle it out on Earth, and people are like, what? Yeah, but yeah, well, that's what we're gonna do. We can't fight each other directly, so we've been trying to fight each other indirectly. Now we're gonna fight each other directly. And D&D is like that. Again, that's very much D&D, where the ideas in the prime material plane often gets invaded by demons, sort of, but usually, that would leave a retaliation by angels and, destruction of the world, rather than the rapture. That may be a bit too um, religious. Also, one of the things is because these rules have um, damage reduction as a thing. The progress level rules. The default progress level is PL6, giving humanity access to advanced weapons, cybernetics, and mecha, all which are described in D20 Future. You have to decide. Magic is rare, do not inherit in the Earth. In the Earth inherited setting, after actually gets to heaven, still up meaning forever. After this event, as the divine magic disappeared, most of the sufficient fate and manifest divine magic were taken. So, divine magic with the acolyte advanced class. So, however, arcane magic still works in this setting. Again, this is based on D&D. Maybe in your campaign world, there's no difference between divine magic and arcane magic. Why would it be? Maybe all magic was divine. But I would switch it that there's actually more magic, because literally you have magical creatures like demons and angels and unicorns running around. It's like there should be more magic, not less. Very much kind of Shadowrun, but taken to 11, where instead of society transforming itself, I guess Shadowrun could be considered post-apocalyptic if we go by the definition in the early I did in the stream, where it's the end of the world as we know it. Then Shadowrun can be post-apocalyptic in a sense. Actually, probably is post-apocalyptic, sort of. Now that I think about it, I'll float that idea to Adam Coble or his next campaign. Now, this is where things get interesting. The power groups. You have the Avengers of Humanity, Uh, and this is based again on D20, and I like the way D20 did things because it didn't really have alignments per se, it had allegiances. Agenda: restore law and order, destroy remaining angels and fiends. Network of communities. Symbol: Roman fasces. Most common alliance: Order of the Machine. The Dam: this is of gratification. Anarchy: Bloody Red X. Common alliance: Individual fiends. Let's look at the Dam. The Rapture let those people who straddle the middle ground on morality, ethics, neither particular good or evil, to their own devices. If it's set, didn't last long, however, because those left behind were faced with the fight for their survival. Some turned to help their fellows, discovering goodness. The Dam is a group that fell sway to moral free for all that followed the Rapture. In the absence, even appearance of heavenly reward and infernal damnation, these people felt that they could do whatever they wanted. Seeing their destruction being dealt by angel, fiend, and human alike, they embraced nihilism. Now, this nihilism is the pop cultural type of nihilism. I would suggest you do a little research on nihilism yourself. Just like anarchy, yeah, you can use a pop culture reference, no problem, but you should be careful because you might find somebody in the table goes like, that's not how. That's nope, that's not how it works. Yeah. Um, uh, Groups of them frequently ally themselves with fiends, etc. I mean, one of the things about it is how. I mean, they haven't fired in the conflict between angels and fiends. So this is a very good idea because it's you have different societies and you could create your own, right? I've used it, it's like the faction system in fifth edition, right? And certainly factions would be playing a key role um, in a post-apocalyptic world. Um, Order of the Machine, building side based on logic and ritual of the divine. Network of small bands, electronic chip, Avengers of Humanity, right? And look at like the sheriff as an assault rifle, like and you have dominions and demons, and we can skip this. Again, this is very specific to. I suppose you could bring in um, all kinds of take the monster manual from D&D and Fiendful and all that. It's like boom, here it is. Ah, this I like. Maps. A good source book should have maps so you can use. Large fortune. Atomic Sunrise, of course, it's nuclear apocalypse. This basically is Fallout, right? To a degree. Regardless, are well armed troopers. Uh, the US only weapons of being too terrible are employed. The cities are incendiary, government topple, and 95% of the human race is burned away. Those who remain must fight for survival in a ready landscape with warlords and other groups struggle to maintain the remnants. This is pretty straightforward. Standard kind of um, post World War II, post Third World War, right? World War III type of thing. A lot of the groups are based on former. Actually, it's an American centric campaign. Uh, CIA, DF, FEMA, uh, Nautilus Club, the societies, power group. I like that the government of New Texas, the West is wilder than ever. One of the things is that it, and this is one of the things that, again, to go back to this, how much technology do you have available, and how readily people can repair vehicles and have guns. Uh, that I think is very interesting. So New Texas, Mutual Armored Radillos, Wasteland Marauders, right? This is Fallout kind of stuff. I like this. Radillos, like that. The compound is it's a university. Built radius control 4 key structures that have been. This is a university they control. Uh, and has some classes. Very much this is Mad Max, Fury Road. Well, Fury Road, I suppose you would say that way. Uh, and this is the last one. This is close to New World kind of thing. I like the opening. Uh, fiction. Weird clicks out 500 years after being the frost sequence, heart rate normal, body temperature normal for legends. Captain Sterling, you're listening to this, so you have survived cryogenic freezing. You and your Rip Van team have now acted. With beat the creepers or lost them. This is a not your girlfriend. Uh, this is memory error recording ends breach of bunker detected. This is a I think the most interesting campaign because it's an alien invasion where the aliens didn't win and they tried to win and they forced themselves to mutate and essentially became beasts. So this is a high-tech Earth, and also this they are subject to an alien invasion. Terrible insect-like creatures from the world, the Spanthi, arriving in a vast fleet of master genetic engineering biological-based spaceships and attacks all the nations of the world. This is 2005, so this is a combination of you know of ID4 and War of the Worlds, and considering the ID4, especially the movie, was ripped out of the 1950s version of War of the Worlds, there's no surprises. Overlap. Um, uh, the weapons easily neutralize Earth crew satellite-based defense and knock out of the world global system. Billions of biological nanites are released into the atmosphere. The creatures destroy the internet, shoot to vast numbers of advanced technology components, pollute and ruin vehicle fuel. Each also will last several years. The Spathi are in no hurry. These most of their numbers are cryogenic sleep. Oh, here, any fleet content to attack humanity for distant and making counter mission. 90 troops in areas and few Spathi are defeated with a little technology falls in human hands. By the turn of the war is clear. Humanity cannot win without resorting to weapons so terrible that may make the planet unhittable. Some need to fall. Few prisoners realize the use of atomic weapons. Somebody is inevitable. Fearing the Holocaust, such warfare will bring these visionaries to weapons. So basically, people are frozen so that they can come back, right? The Red Van team, Red Van Winkle type. A variation of this would be because the key here is the people out of time, people who remember the current era, right, who were around and now find themselves in a new world. This is a very good use of a new world because the apocalypse really affected the world, right? It's not simply a distant memory and has shaped it. And part of it is, I would say, if you play it right, would be to the uh, the mystery of what happened in between. So the apocalypse is crucial to this. Understanding the apocalypse is crucial to this. So yeah, I like that. Where in most new world scenarios, it doesn't matter. And something happened X amount of years ago, we don't care, right? The other variant would be one I would call Terra. Would be where you have Lost Earth, and Lost Earth was lost because of an alien invasion or war, whatever. Humanity went to the stars, and somehow a group of heroes, right, or protagonists, PCs, uh, go back to Earth, not back in time, and land in a new Earth, and they're stranded there for whatever reason. I think that would be a cool scenario, which kind of fits this. Uh, you started begun to develop, but most are limited to Iron Age technology. So essentially, uh, again, this is New Earth kind of situation, but the players have the knowledge and may have access to some of the technology. Uh, I like the, and again, groups like Adeptus Day, should have an alternate bridge, stuff like that. A lot of mutations. So yeah, this is, in a nutshell, there's some rules for revolution. This is D20 Apocalypse, right? Uh, it is very well written, although now that I've gone back to it, it has a little bit of redundancy, right? And this is a case where you're like, I never played D20 Modern or D20 Future. Why would I care about this? Well, because you can always find in old books a lot of good material, right? A good source book will give you good, solid ideas. Already, I was thinking about new ideas, taking the ideas that the game already had and making my own variations, right? That's based on a good foundation. So, if you're looking to create your own um, post-apocalyptic campaign, and you come across this book, this was also in Drive Through RPG. I think this was on sale for $10, the PDF, which is pretty good. I would say pick it up, right? Maybe you want to play D20 Modern and use this book. I would think there's better systems out there, but yeah, you can still do it. So yeah, I probably will do more books as I find them. These reviews, usually this was supposed to be Beyond the Cover was supposed to be for new books that I bought, but I decided to